This episode of Twin Cities Trekkies is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor before, let me explain. First of all, it's free. There are creation tools that help you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership required. They'll also help you to distribute your podcast so it can be heard on many different platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's all you need in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Okay, everyone. Welcome to episode 24 of Twin Cities Trekkies. I am Wes.
And I'm Kenzie.
And today it is going to be what if scenarios. Kind of like how, if certain characters were to stay or something like that, would the series have gone on? How would they have been different? That kind of thing. If a certain character, didn't die or didn't leave. How would the show like maybe worked a little differently? I mean, I'm thinking like Tasha Yar when I'm thinking of this scenario.
Yeah.
Mainly Tasha Yar, or if say Harry Kim was the one who was gone from Voyager instead of Kess.
Yeah. What if he would have ever been promoted from ensign?
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much what it's going to be. It's an experiment as we go, kind of thing, which is okay. It's fine with me. So
and even a lot of the plot points of like Star Trek in general are even what if scenarios, right? Like, what if Picard would have been given Deep Space Nine instead of Cisco? What if someone else would have become Locutus instead of Picard, or like
it's like
playing out that.
Yeah, because I like what if scenarios. I do, and it's really and I like those episodes that have the where history goes a little differently than normal timeline.
And all of J.J. Abrams' like story timeline is all what if scenario. Like, what if Kirk's dad died? What if he doesn't want to join Starfleet? What about this? Like, what if Spock decided to stick with Vulcan schooling and stay in the academy there rather than joining Starfleet?
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much what it's going to be, how we would feel about those kind of scenarios. So to get in touch with us, it's pretty simple. Simply email us at tctrekkiespodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to send us an email. We'll gladly read it. And, any feedback you have or written, you can put a comment on our Facebook and Instagram posts. Handle is TC Trekkies Pod for both platforms, and stuff like that. And on YouTube as well, there's a little comment section on when the episode's on YouTube. So any comments there can be read as well. And then to send us voice messages, go to anchor.fm/Twin Cities Trekkies. Click on that little message button, enable your microphone, and start recording your voice. Granted, like we said in the last episode, if you have completely an hour to kill and you have a lot of things to say, we'll definitely dedicate the episode to you. So, and how we would probably break it up and react to everything you have to say separately. But
you should do like an episode format. I don't know if you can record on Facebook. You got to do like a live podcast once, maybe invite people to join a little watch party and talk with us.
Yeah, totally
interesting. Or going on Twitch or however people like to do that, and then just have like a little hangout sesh talking about stuff.
Yeah,
kind of neat.
Yeah, meet and greet, that kind of thing. That'd be interesting to do. We can definitely do that down the line. That's perfectly fine. I know that some people do they actually broadcast their podcast episodes live and then do like a separate file for it later.
Yeah.
So I know certain Star Trek podcasts like to do that and then do a separate audio file that's like comes out about 6 or 7 hours later,
Yeah.
And it's, yep. But yeah, that's definitely fine. But keep in mind that any feedback you do leave, written or verbal, may be featured in a future episode of Twin Cities Trekkies. Okay, so what if scenarios? This is kind of like an open-ended topic because there's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, I was like, do we want to focus on it kind of by series, like they like key what if scenarios from each series that we wonder about?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, definitely.
Just to like kind of organize it a little bit because it's like
Yeah.
I'm always all over the place. I feel like Star Trek is wonderful for this, right? Like it just like piques the imagination. Like my dad and I would sit around and talk so much about like just talking about what if scenarios, or like what if this happened differently. I mean, Voyager was just all about that. Like what if they would have found like wormholes to get them home? Like I mean, there's literally episodes exploring all of that. Like
Yeah.
Like changing the course of how the show even plays out, even to the end. Like
Yeah.
with different what if scenarios. Like
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's endless, so it's like easy to get overwhelmed. So I would think like breaking it out like that would be good.
Yeah. And I'm gonna start. What if Jeffrey Hunter had stuck with Star Trek after the first pilot?
Yeah.
That's one thing for certain. Like I'm friends with his son on Facebook. His name is
Oh,
Chris.
really?
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah, his name is Chris.
Oh,
And so it's kind of cool that actually, speaking of Chris Hunter, shout out to you, by the way. He's actually met Anson Mount from the
oh,
he's actually met Anson Mount and actually gave him his approval.
that's super cool.
Yeah, I actually know his son. So Chris Hunter. So, but I'm thinking about if he had stuck around. I mean, granted, there's many different stories about why he didn't do the second pilot. Like one, like I think Gene Roddenberry had said it was his wife who told him not to do more.
Oh, that's funny.
I heard that story, but then I also heard other stories that he was like more of a movie star than he was a TV star.
Yeah, I think that was a big thing back then. Like people deciding, having a very hard line between those two parts of their life. Like, do I want to be movie star or TV? Which back then, I think, especially in the 50s and 60s, it was a huge deal to be a movie star. And I think more people wanted that than TV because TV was just starting to take off and wasn't seen as glamorous as a movie star.
Yeah, definitely. And and it's like they probably thought that TV was underneath them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would have been very interesting had Jeffrey Hunter stuck with, but then the whole rest of the cast were the same people, like Nimoy, DeForest Kelly.
Yeah.
Like just everyone except who was in the second pilot, including and then like Nichelle Nichols and stuff like that. Yeah. But the only person who was recast was was stuck around was Jeffrey Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
So you got Christopher Pike with Spock and Bones and Sulu and Chekhov and Uhura and Scotty. I think that would have been an interesting. I think it would have worked a little bit differently because when we meet Pike in the first pilot, he's a very tired kind of captain. He's sick of being the captain. He wants to do something else.
Yep.
But then after Talos 4, he changes into this completely different character. He's more at peace with what he's doing.
Yeah.
And it only took until being captured by Telosians to make that happen. But I think so. I think the dynamic would have been different.
Yeah.
Obviously, Pike being in the chair probably wouldn't have happened. in the universe. But definitely, it probably dynamic would have been a little bit different. Uh, I don't. I know that probably Pike probably would have done the same thing Kirk had done in the Search for Spock. And stuff like that.
Yeah.
Granted, like say sacrifice everything for Spock because from we saw in Discovery and stuff like that, Pike really went to bat for him too. So bat for Spock back then too. So yeah, it's like I think that would have been like still there. I'm not sure how he would reacted with McCoy. Maybe maybe the same way he did with Boyce. Maybe. Like,
Yeah.
So I think definitely. What are your thoughts about that?
In the original series, I just feel like there's not a lot that I've thought like would be different, except like what if they were just stuck with the original pilot people, and that what if they would have kept number one as a woman and played it out? Would it have finally caught on and people would have been like okay with it? Like would it have forced people to advance a little bit societally? Seeing that being like, okay, fine, I could deal with seeing a woman in power. Like, would that have changed a lot of social things if they would have just pushed for it really hard? Because that was the biggest thing with that I always wondered about. Where I'm like, what if they would have actually, put their foot down and played ahead of the times, like really hard, like truly in a futuristic way, being like, no, we are like, we believe this would be the case in the future, so deal with it. Would have people in general been more accepting of women in powerful positions then, rather than kind of giving in, being like, yeah, it's a bit much for the time, right? Let's scrap it and start over. Yeah. And that being a little different. But they tried, but there was a lot of that, like just like what if scenarios, like what if instead of just having like a Black woman being in a pretty like potent position on the starship, what if we had a Black captain? What if Cisco was somebody that was like we had our first like Black captain? Would that have been super unacceptable? Of course, during that time, like people probably would have freaked out. But at the same time, for a show that's supposed to be ahead of its time, like and be in the future, like they definitely played it. They played it to the time, which makes sense. But given like that period of production, there's definitely like that weird feeling of like, what if they would have been a little more like forward thinking with the characters? They tried for the time, like, but what if it had been a little more extreme, like for the time, and stuck with it?
Yeah, and when you're saying that, Kenzie, I'm thinking of like something that happened like that was prominent in the 70s. The trying to get the I'm a huge history buff, so trying to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed. If they had stuck with the original cast for the first pilot, I think probably they would have cited Star Trek as the reason to pass the Equal Rights Amendment back in the early 70s.
I honestly think for a show like that, if they would have been very like milestone. I mean, just looking at how like having Uhura and Kirk like kissing in that show was a huge deal. I mean, that was like, I mean, that was a kiss felt around the world. Like everybody was so mind blowing that someone would even do that. And that it was like an awesome thing, and it changed society because of it. And I think if they would have stuck with having a woman in power in the show, and I think it honestly would have forced people to be much more accepting quicker. Because TV was a huge influencer during that time. Like that's mainly how people saw different perspectives. Most people weren't traveling around meeting new people. You're not living in areas where there's probably very diverse, unless you were in like a bigger cities or living somewhere where you had a lot more people coming in. Most people lived in their little nuclear families, like in areas where everyone looked just like them. And seeing something like Star Trek was probably this cool, like to them, a thought experiment, like these what if scenarios to them, where they're like, wow, like what if scenarios push people to think a little differently about situations. And I think if they would have stuck with it, I think it would have created probably an alternate timeline for social aspects of humanity here on Earth. And then again, who knows? The fact that they even tried it, even like what makes me think it would have been a huge deal is the fact that they even tried was huge. Like them just even trying that once had an impact. So like if they would have stuck with it, I can imagine it would even have more of an impact.
Oh yeah, totally. I completely agree with that. So, and hopefully now, I mean, granted, it's more commonplace now that you see women in power.
Yep.
But yeah, it's more commonplace. But
there'll always be something that feels kind of we're still dealing with it now, like underrepresented people,
yes.
or like it, like kind of erased from history, kind of people like avoiding like representing them. Like I would say people still we've had previous episodes about this, like the gay community, like I mean, it's people being represented across like the LGBTQA community, like what if in Deep Space Nine, Garrick and Bashir actually did have their relationship flesh out, like, and they were successfully represented, like as a gay couple on that show, like openly. Yep. Like they were kind of implying and writing them for a while until like Rick Berman was like, "Nope, out of here, quit writing them that way." And it's stuff like that where I'm like thinking of like how impactful it is to have representation and how positive it is to see somebody like that, like, or if they would have more explicitly represented Dax as more of like this trans person, like non-binary person as well, like on both sides of that. Like her character technically is, but they try not to like touch that as like an actual topic. And I feel like if they would have embraced that more and worked with that like in TNG too with Riker and his relationship with that alien race that was like non-binary too. That was another like big deal. But what if they would have been more like forward about it, like it played more with it than like trying to make it more socially acceptable for the time. Like, yeah, they're non-binary, but she basically, I mean, she looks traditionally female anyway, just to like make people feel comfortable, and which isn't always the case, but it could also be the case too. But there's a lot of the social what if scenarios I think about in Star Trek. Like, what if they would have played this out differently?
Yes, totally. Yeah, so yeah, that's how I think about the original series. Yeah, definitely. What if so I'm gonna move on to the next generation. Or wait a minute, let's go back a little bit. During the first, before the motion picture ever came out, there was a ton of plans to like either make it a TV movie to revive Star Trek after being success in syndication, stuff like that. One of the things that was going to happen was going to be a new television series, Star Trek Phase 2.
Oh,
yeah. Actually, the pilot for that show ended up being the motion picture. It's called so it's a revised version of that pilot script called In Thy Image, which eventually became here's a funny scenario is that they pitched it to Michael Eisner, who was the head of Paramount in the mid 70s, and he stomps down and says, "We've been looking for a Star Trek movie for 5 years, and this is it."
Yeah.
And that's what it became. The motion picture became what Phase 2 was going to be. I mean, everything was going to be updated. Like the Enterprise was different and stuff like that, and stuff like that. There's a scenario in which Phase 2 happens. They made there was going to be a cornerstone of a new television network called the Paramount Television Service. It's a precursor to the UPN and stuff like that. So they were going to have a Star Trek show as that's cornerstone. It was going to air on, it was going to be Star Trek Phase 2, going to have everybody back except for Leonard Nimoy, which at that time he was suing Paramount actually for unauthorized. I know about the history about certain. I'm sorry, I'm a history buff, so like he was suing Paramount because for unauthorized use of his likeness as Spock. At the time. So because apparently he had been, what had happened was how that whole happened is he was in London with his wife, his then wife, and it's not Susan Bay, it's a different woman, and he was there with Henry Fonda, very legendary actor,
Yep.
and his wife. And Henry Fonda tells Leonard Nimoy, "Hey, do you know are you getting proceeds from these billboards?"
Oh man!
And it was
Drama ensues.
it was a promo of Heineken beer, and it was a picture of Spock drinking the beer.
So much wrong with that.
Yeah, so much wrong with it. Aesthetically
Vulcans
wise,
can't even process.
yeah,
It's a ceremonial. Alcohol, it doesn't even affect them really. They're the elves of the alien world.
Yeah, so during the original series, Leonard Nimoy got proceeds from licensing of Spock's likeness and stuff like that. But then after the show ended, Paramount kept on still making money off of his likeness, but they had no right to do it. So he ended up filing a lawsuit with them. And the only reason why he appeared in the motion picture was that they settled the lawsuit.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It was, I don't know how much the money was, probably like millions and millions of dollars.
Oh
yeah. But definitely so phase 2 happens. It was gonna be on Saturday nights.
Nice.
Yeah, because Saturday night actually back in the 70s was actually a popular night for television.
Yeah, people get together with their families. That's how you partied. Everyone watched TV together.
Yeah, exactly. So Saturday night used to be a very popular night for television. So it's not anymore. Yeah. It usually is like Thursday or Monday for sure, but not Saturday anymore. So there was going to be stories that were going to be very ambitious, stuff like that, but it was kind of a little dated and stuff like that. But it would have been exciting because William Shatner was only signed up for 13 episodes and that was it. So because he's a greedy person. So,
like Bill Shatner, everybody.
Yeah, William Shatner, he's greedy. I mean, granted, back in the 70s, he was kind of struggling.
Yeah.
But definitely with that and stuff like that.
That's an interesting what if,
yeah.
It's instead just a new show rather than a movie.
Yep. They was gonna have 3 new characters. There was gonna be a Vulcan named Zahn to replace Spock.
Yep.
And then Decker and Ilea, who ended up being in the motion picture. But it would have been interesting to see
a new dynamic with a new Vulcan.
Yeah,
especially if it's gonna be a full Vulcan rather than half Vulcan.
Yep, it was gonna be a full Vulcan. Yep, he was gonna be a full Vulcan, stuff like that, and it was gonna be interesting. And we all know that the Decker and Ilea kind of love thing evolved into Riker and Troy for the Next Generation. So we have if that happens, if that had happened, I think Star Trek probably would have been dead right there.
Yeah,
because
I think that would have been without having a very big cinematic piece for people to get into, especially at a time where movies were just so much bigger than TV.
Yeah,
now it's like the opposite. It's like I feel like people much more appreciate TV series than movies. Even like people like to have that access, but yeah, I think Star Trek would have probably fallen apart if they just tried to make more TV without making movies.
Yeah, because that time we had Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, you have to definitely combat that.
Yeah, and definitely that's why the motion picture happened. So yeah,
that would have scenario could have ended with Star Trek laying down, dying, rolling over.
Yeah, and I think, and I remember, and I mentioned this.
That almost nearly happened in the 2000s, like with Enterprise and the last like TNG movie. And it's like that definitely like fizzled out there near the end, where I was like, when I was growing up, I worried about Star Trek kind of going away because it kind of became very not popular. Like I meet so many people that just did not know or care about Star Trek. And it was kind of sad. And then J.J. Abrams came and like decided to liven it up and be like, hey, remember this, guys? Yeah, I remember Kirk and Spock. Well, here they are again.
Yep, you'll hear
like
it again. Yep. Yeah.
revamped.
Yep, it definitely. And speaking of the films, and so there was a concept that was going to be after the Final Frontier kind of bombed at the box office. Um, I mean, granted, it was number one movie and when it first came out, but then it went after that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Which that is like the worst nightmare for any movie. It's like, oh, you spent all this money and it sucked in the box office.
Yeah, it was number one when it came out, but then after that. But there was a concept that Harv Bennett, which I forgot to mention last time we recorded, which was about the influences of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Harv Bennett has a big part in the keeping the franchise alive.
Yeah.
So when Harv Bennett was offered to do the sixth film, he wanted to do a prequel set during the years of Starfleet Academy with the characters.
Yeah.
And how they got to the Enterprise, that kind of thing, how they all met, kind of thing. Granted, that was kind of like revisited in 2009, but
yeah,
and actually happened. But he wanted to do that kind of story. Paramount said, no, we kind of want the original series cast to do one more movie to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the franchise. And Harv Bennett fought, and he ended up leaving Star Trek after the fifth film. So he ended up leaving in 1990, so from the franchise. So and he wanted to do it so bad, and Paramount just said no. And it's kind of like, and it was, I guess it was envisioned as like a Top Gun version of Star Trek at one point, and they had and the writer of this version probably would have been David Lowery, who wrote The Final Frontier. So it would have been a Top Gun in space, meeting the Enterprise crew and stuff like that. And it would have been like a framing story for McCoy at Starfleet Academy, giving a commencement address. So I think Star Trek, I don't think that movie would have done very well.
Yeah. I don't think people would have cared.
No, I don't think they would have cared either. I mean, granted, we had a prequel movie about 19 years later. So,
but I think people cared more about learning about these characters then, because they were trying to like reconnect people with, the original series characters. And I think doing that prequel made a lot of people care more, being like, who are these people? How do they act? Or at least in this timeline, like that's really cool. And now I have an appreciation for them. I think we care a lot more about backstory and the details of characters now than in the past.
Yes. And I mean, granted, prequel-itis still exists in Hollywood.
Yes, it's terrible.
It's terrible. We get like, okay, I don't think it's necessarily prequel-itis as it is reboot-itis.
Yes.
Because I mean, granted, we've had franchises that have been rebooted like several times. Like like the Terminator franchise.
Yeah.
After the second one, everyone seems to think, okay, 3, it's not gonna acknowledge the first 2. Or like the recent one that came out last year, like a couple years ago, ignore what came before and do this whole thing. Like, it's
trying really hard to play off of the success. Like Home Alone 3 had nothing to do with the original like Home Alones, and like later there's like a random Halloween movie that has nothing to do with the other Halloween storylines too. And it's like when they try really hard to like make like a storyline off of something else and being like, let's reboot this to other people, it's like, you gotta be careful with that. Like,
yes,
think about what you're doing.
Yeah.
With great power comes great responsibility, folks.
Yes. All right. So there is one thing from Next Generation that I kind of want to mention. It is Tasha Yar. So during the first season, Denise Crosby kind of hated being Tasha Yar.
Yeah.
It was very well documented that she really hated it. I mean, even though she would be like, she would be there day after day, you know, and she hated it. And
Yeah, that's
it's
tough.
so she goes to Gene Roddenberry and says, I kind of want to get out of this 6-year deal you had me sign here, because all the cast members were signed for 6 years
Yep.
when they first started, and so Gene Roddenberry obliged by her request, and we got the episode Skin of Evil as a result. So here's the scenario: what if that didn't happen?
Yeah.
What if she actually went to Gene Roddenberry and said, "Hey, I want to do more with my role here. I need to, like, what can you do to help me?
Like my character more."
Yeah, you could tell the camera loves her.
Yeah, I know, and like a lot of people loved her as a character. That's why it's like tough to be like, why do you not like it? It sucks when you have a character that people really like and they don't like it back. Like I just have like Harrison Ford not being the biggest fan of him constantly being associated with Han Solo, but it's like, it's hard to get away from. But at least it seemed like he enjoyed being that character.
Yes.
And during the time, but it's hard if it's like you like a character, but while they're playing it, they're like, yeah, I'm not a fan.
Yeah. So I think it would have been interesting had VR stayed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it would have been interesting. I think she said after the episode was made, the way that she and Worf had that interaction in the beginning of Skin of Evil,
Yeah.
if they had been more like that, she would have stayed. She
Yeah.
said she said that. So she wanted to stay and stuff like that, but she needed to go on because all she was standing there for 15 hours a day saying, "Aye, aye, Captain."
Yeah. It's like you could have done more with it, guys.
Yeah, you could
That
have
definitely
more.
feels like a flop on their end, just being like, you had this character potentially, you didn't do anything with it. And then hindsight's 2020, and people are like, oh man, like you could have done so much with it. It's like, yeah, it would be nice if we would have realized that during the time
Yeah,
we were filming.
yeah, I wish you realized that. Yeah. I mean, granted, I think it probably would have been interesting to see.
Yeah.
I don't think we would have seen Kalar.
Mm-hmm.
I think Worf probably, and I think this is my opinion. I think Worf and Yar probably would have been an interesting couple.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I ship
or
them.
Yar and Data definitely.
Yes, yeah.
Fully
Like
functional.
shipping potential couples with her, like her
Yeah,
character would be cool.
yeah, and, it's either one of those two. I think either one of those two would have been a great couple, and stuff like that. We probably would never have gotten Jadzia in that scenario,
Mm-hmm.
or or Kalar,
Yeah.
or Kalar in that scenario, if Yar had stayed, stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Oh yeah, and then the other one, Dr. Pulaski,
Yeah.
if she
What if
had
she just would have never existed?
never existed or stayed.
Or stay, yeah, if she would have stayed. Like that's
Yeah.
always like a weird play to see that go. It's like what would the show have been like if she would have stayed?
Mm-hmm.
Like would things gotten a little more comfortable dynamic wise?
Yeah, because especially I think by
I
the
feel like they
time
would have figured it out.
eventually they would have figured it out, because she didn't really like Picard that much. That either, she didn't like Data at first.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually she came to have a mutual respect for Data as well as Picard, because because Picard and Pulaski clashed a few times about
Yeah.
about the way he ran things versus how she knew how to run things around. But I think it probably would have like been like interesting to see that evolve better. It would have been interesting to see if how and then she had like a thing for Worf too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Everyone's got a thing for Worf.
yeah, she
Like
had
everyone at some point just was a little weird about Worf.
yeah, she had a thing for Worf too. Because she kept his Klingon measles diagnosis secret from Captain Picard.
Yeah, that was very nice.
Yep, and treated her with the Klingon tea ceremony, which, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
they have tea. Which
Yeah, another food thing.
yeah,
Like,
but it's poisonous to humans, so that's why I didn't mention it.
yeah.
So, but definitely, yeah. it's it's kind of interesting to see that happening. But yeah, I think probably it would have been eventually, more relaxed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to see how she would have you know, handled like characters like Dr. Russell in the episode Ethics, or stuff like that. She probably
Yeah.
with Worf's back injury and stuff like that.
Speaking of ethics, that was one of my for like what if scenarios with Next Generation. It'd be like, what if Data never got his rights to be like his own, like what if that trial wouldn't have gone well, and it was like, actually you do belong, you're kind of considered property of like the scientific community of the Federation, so yeah, you are going to get taken apart by Data. Like, would they have made other Datas then? Would he have gone away like and be used for like study? And what a weird like realm. Like, I'm glad they didn't do that, because that'd just be dumb. But I'm like, I always thought about that. I'm like, what if he would have lost that? And it's like, well, technically you are a creation, like a byproduct that, like, even though you've become sentient, like you still technically belong to the Federation, like Science Academy stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The Measure of a Man goes a different way. Yeah, and he's no longer on the show and stuff like that. Yeah. There's actually a book. It's called I forgot the name of it now. It's one of the Myriad Universe anthologies written by Pocket Books, in which that scenario actually played out. And and Datas are everywhere and stuff like that. And it's like a what if scenario book series. So there's only like 3 novels, but
cool though.
Yep. And stuff like that. But I was gonna say something about that. Yeah, what if Crusher stayed?
Yeah.
And I think of the episode The Dauphine from the second year. How would she have given Wesley advice about romantic relationships?
Yeah.
How she would have reacted to her son being of age to date somebody, or go out with
that would have
somebody.
been very different.
Yeah,
like seeing those moments in different series, like that's a tough conversation. Like seeing Cisco do that with his son is like tough too.
Yeah, I would be interesting to see that happening. Yeah. So back and on the DS9, the one that everyone seems to think I have a what if scenario about is Jadzia.
Yeah.
And the the
heart-wrenching. Why I love her character.
Yeah, and it's and good old Rick Berman is the responsible for her death.
Yep.
Yeah, because she wanted to go. I mean, she wanted to be a more recurring character in the final. I mean, they offered her season 7. Everyone else had signed on, but not her. She wanted to have Jadzia be a more recurring character in the final year.
Yeah.
And Rick Berman said, no.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, tough crap, you're gone. You're gone. And that's how it all became like that. But what if she actually got her wish, and actually got her wish, and actually stayed and actually did the recurring character status? I think she probably would have been an interesting way how to play baseball.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, and other things.
I think it would have made the show feel better near the end. Like, I think people really grew to like her character, and I think that kind of made people. I think that was like the start of the beginning of the end type of feelings, where it's like making kind of bad decisions based on your own like personal like misgivings about people you're working with. And then you start feeling that throughout the series that follow.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think she probably would have gotten her wish and stuff like that. I think probably, towards the end of that episode where she dies, she I think probably they would have had a baby. We would have had a baby. Like, it would have been interesting to see a Klingon Trill baby.
Yeah.
mixed baby, I think probably that would have happened. It
Cool.
probably would have happened. Because I know that towards the end of the episode, Bashir tells Jadzia, I see like a lot of improvements in your whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I just think about it when I think about Deep Space Nine is like, what if Picard went to, as
mm,
Locutus, like killed Cisco's wife or like, attacked Deep Space Nine? Like, what if that would have never happened? And I don't think Cisco would have ever become, have it
mhm,
like managing Deep Space Nine. It would have likely been Picard. And
yeah.
like how different that story would have been if it was
Oh,
just like that.
yeah.
Completely different story. Though I
Yeah.
would pay to see Picard in Gul Dukat like have
Yeah.
interactions. I'd love to see that. That's like way more that totally different dynamic.
Yeah, it's like how he would handle the Dominion make me think.
Yeah.
Yeah, how he would handle the Dominion makes me think too. How he would.
Hmm.
I think he might have handled it a little differently, but
Yes. Yeah.
I think I don't know. I don't know how he would have reacted had he had been in charge of DS9. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Very different. I think I don't know. It's hard for me to think of like how he would do in a much more open space like that. Like I think Cisco did a good job of being friendly while also still being firm with everybody.
Hmm.
And I feel like he was good at understanding people's personal dilemmas, like dealing with all the like drama with the Bajoran and Cardassian issues and all the like weirdness of dealing with the wormhole and everything that it brought. Like I feel like
Hmm.
he's really good at handling that. And I don't know. I mean Picard would have handled it too, but I just feel like he's a lot more stately and like this
Hmm.
has to be the way kind of person more than like Cisco seemed to listen a lot more and be a little more like, I understand where you're coming from. Like, and I think we can make this work.
Yep. All right. So there's two scenarios in Voyager I want to mention. One is, and I just think about production what ifs too. So
Mm-hmm.
Genevieve Bujold, who was originally cast in the role of Janeway, um, left after 1.5 days of working on the pilot. But because she didn't feel that she was up to the rigors of episodic television, so she left.
Yeah.
And then Kate Mulgrew was hired a couple weeks later. And then
Yeah, that would have been such a different show.
yeah, it would have been a different show had Genevieve Bujold had been stuck with her show. I mean, I've
Mm-hmm.
seen the footage of her as Janeway. She does it so soft spokenly. I mean,
Yeah, Kate Mulgrew feels like the captain that Voyager needed.
yeah.
Like just very like rough and tough, but laid back, but also doesn't deal with BS either.
Hmm. Yeah, she's yeah, so I've seen the footage of Bujold as Janeway. She's very soft spoken. She speaks like, "Hello, how are you?" Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of thing. I don't think it would have been very successful with her being
Yeah.
her being Janeway at all. Um, it's just like I don't think she would have. I think the dynamic of the show probably would have acted a little bit differently had she stayed. Um, because it's just it's the way she behaved as an actress. Um, I don't think Voyager probably would have been successful. It probably would have been that probably would have been the end of Star Trek after like maybe like 2-3 years
Yeah.
of Voyager. Not when everything else doesn't happen, that kind of thing. Voyager ends in 97 or something like that, and that's the end of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah, so that's how I feel about that. Because I've seen the footage of her, it's very different
Yeah.
than when Kate Mulgrew does it. It's very different.
My biggest thing with Voyager is like, what if they would have kept like characters? Like, what if
Mhm.
they would have never gotten Seven of Nine? Seven of Nine helped a lot, even though like she was brought in for ratings. Like, she helped a lot for the voyage home. Like,
Yep.
she was a big part of them getting back in a timely way because of her, like her navigation with astronomy and being able
Yep.
to like utilize that to play off of like the least like the smallest distance path, like making sure that we can try to get back and utilize spatial anomalies to help bring them home quicker.
Yes. Yes. Definitely. I mean, yes, she was brought in for ratings, yes, but
she ended up being an epic character.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of that scenario, there was talks that Harry Kim was gonna be the one gone, and
Yeah,
Seven of Nine would have been the one added.
that
If
would have
that
been.
and if that and Garrett Wong, God bless him, goes to the
Yeah.
producer, goes to the producers and says, "Hey, I'm one of the hottest men in Hollywood today," and it's like, okay, we'll keep you in. We'll get rid of Kess. There you go.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, Kesley just kind of were like, well, see you later.
Yep. And
Granted, not a lot of people liked her, but I mean, like that character in general, but I don't know. I thought she
yeah,
was bubbly and great, like a little fairy person.
yeah, yeah. And it's like it's interesting because I mean, granted, there are some inklings of that scenario playing out in the finale, Scorpion. I
Hmm.
mean, with him being attacked by this species 8472 creature and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
that's what was going to be the end of it. Yeah, it was going to be the end of his character.
Yeah.
but but they but then you got Jerry Ryan joined the cast and stuff like that, and one had to go. Unfortunately, it had to be Jennifer Lean.
Yeah.
But but what if she didn't? But what if it actually didn't happen?
Yeah.
Garrett Wong didn't get voted as one of the top 10 men in Hollywood in '97. Uh, Harry Kim probably would have been dead a second time.
Yeah.
Because remember, he was killed in Deadlock,
Yep.
and then he came back as this like this clone of a divergent Voyager, So yeah, and he thinks the whole thing is so weird. It's like, and then Janeway tells him, Mr. Kim, we're Starfleet officers. Weird is part of the job.
Hmm.
I love that line.
Yes.
That's one of the lines I
Part of the
actually,
job.
yep, I love that line, because the word weird comes up a lot in Voyager.
Yep. Weird. I mean, it is weird. There's a lot of very weird situations they have to go through.
Yeah.
And that's I mean, like Voyager, I'm like overwhelmed by what if scenarios because there's just so many like different things that could have played out, like what if they never did get sent way out and they were just like doing a normal mission like TNG? What if
Mm-hmm.
they never made it back and they just had to live their days out on this until they were rescued? What if they needed to be rescued from there? And
Mm-hmm.
like generations of that family, like a Voyager, just lived out their days on that, or like given up and just lived on a planet and been like, whatever, we'll just stay on this planet.
Yeah.
Like what if what if they never what if 7 of 9 like assimilated some people and took them away? What if she never was unassimilated?
Mm-hmm.
And
Which we'll get in Picard, hopefully.
yep, yeah, like yeah, I know that's what I'm hoping. I'm like, hey, what if she never was assimilated? Like, we'll see, maybe get to see that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I
I don't
don't
really
have.
have any for Enterprise except what if we didn't have that last episode? I'm like,
Yeah, what if we didn't have an episode, or heck, even if it got renewed for a fifth year?
yeah.
Because I've heard a lot of storylines that they were planning for season 5,
Mm-hmm.
which was included a return to the mirror universe,
Yeah, that'd have
more
been
of the
cool to see that explored.
more of Empress Sato. I
Yeah.
mean, okay, I like In a Mirror Darkly, except for part 2, the way it ends, because it's very open ended
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like unresolved.
Yeah, the dark mirror, like the mirror universe feels really weird and like often under like represent. Like I worry about like that needs to be a lot more explored because like it seems like threatening auras all the time where they're like aware. It seems like their side is more aware of infiltrating our side than the other way around. Like that they're
Mm-hmm.
actively trying to wage war with our side of the mirror.
Yes, that would be interesting to see a war between both universes.
Yeah.
That would be interesting to see.
It feels like that's what it almost always is, where it's like very aggressive, like actually malicious,
Mm-hmm.
dark mirror side, and then like we're just kind of like, oh, whoops, we accidentally interacted with the mirror universe. Oh well, and then keep going, and it's like, they seem a lot more malicious and like intent, like on messing with our timeline or our universe. Like I
Yeah,
would be a little more worried about that, like coming in and infiltrating us.
Yeah, and I've heard that it was like, that more of like Empress Sato, that kind of thing, what happened to her after that episode. There was also plans to bring back the Kazinti from the animated series. There was also plans to do more of a prequel to the Romulan War, which sadly Enterprise never got to.
Yeah,
because it would have been, I think the stories they would have told for that time period.
It would have been cool to learn more about it because it's a huge part of Star Trek history. Like it's always referenced and like talked about, and it's like it's a huge key area of drama throughout like multiple series, and it's like, what happened?
Yeah, and it's like we could have like seen that. It would have been probably the storylines for that kind of war would have been on pace with what the Dominion War was for DS9. That kind of thing. It would have been just as brutal, but just dark and stuff like that, which would have been cool. And then also there was a Borg origin story too. I've heard there was a Borg origin story. They were
which would also be cool to learn about because Borg being our greatest enemy to the Federation, we don't get a lot of story about how did that even start? What even like? Why did it get so big? How did no one notice it for so long? Like that is like my biggest thing too of like how in the world did so many aliens go missing, especially ones from the Federation, and everyone's just like, I don't know, something happened. And it's like, mass kidnappings and like mass like disappearances of like planets and people. I would start wondering like as a Federation who is supposed to be accountable for exploring strange new worlds and kind of keeping tabs on the galaxy. It's kind of surprising that would somehow go unnoticed for so long.
Yes, and it would have been interesting to see what happens, what happened with that, because there was plans to bring back Alice Krige from First Contact and the final episode of Voyager. To play this Starfleet officer who ends up trying to find the origins of the Borg, gets assimilated, and ends up being the Borg Queen. So that was a plan for that. There was also plans to return to an episode of the original series from the Cloud Minders, the city of Stratos, stuff like that. So and then also a starbase, the destruction of the first starbase, that would have been another one too. So Enterprise, except for that final episode, what if scenarios are abundance, like what they would have done if they had gotten the full 7 years. So it's really interesting. So anyway, I guess that's it. Any final thoughts?
I would like to hear people's what if scenarios. I
would like to
do you have any things that's just haunting your mind about what if they would have gone differently, or what do you wish maybe gone differently in Star Trek that would have played out?
And one more thing about those what if scenarios. What if Riker and the Enterprise were successful in killing Picard as Locutus? It'd be great. We saw a little bit of inkling of that in an episode called Parallels. But what would have happened after that? What would have happened after he killed Picard and the Borg threat? What would have happened?
What a strange way for that to play out. That'd be so weird.
The whole series probably would have had to look a lot differently had Patrick Stewart, because the whole thing happened because of Patrick Stewart. Patrick Stewart having contract negotiations, and he said, if I'm out of here, I'm going back to London. Granted, it probably would have happened. Who knows? It would have been an interesting dynamic after that. But I mean, then you have what's her name? Was it Elizabeth Dennehy playing Shelby, keeping her on the show? That would have been interesting to see how that conflict between Riker and Shelby would have continuously happened after that. So. All right. So until next time, take care and live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.